What's up, guys? Legs Will Move here. Today we're going to talk about a viewer question. This was asked under one of my recent posts, not a video but just a post, and he was asking what's the deal with the Rockers, and we were talking about more minimalist shoes, and Rockers got brought up into the mix, and so I think these are some of the better examples of Rockers, and wanted to talk a little bit about philosophy behind them. And I'm not an expert, I'm not a engineer or anything like that, but I will talk about what I believe I know to be true for these Rockers. First of all, what would the opposite of a rocker be? So you have this Vivo Barefoot Primus Trail, kind of a long name. I think there's actually more to it than that, but this shoe has basically, zero drop, first of all, but you'll also notice that the shoe is very flat. It doesn't do any of the curving for you, and kind of the idea behind a lot of these barefoot shoes is to make your foot do all the work. And I think it's important to start here because I think these are kind of the opposite of what you see in shoes like this. And the idea behind making your foot do as much of the work as possible is so that it strengthens your foot, it strengthens your tendons, and you get to really build and use some of the muscles that you otherwise wouldn't use. And that's kind of the idea behind a lot of these. There's a little bit of back and forth about what those benefits actually look like, but that is mostly what I've heard, a very abbreviated version of what I've heard. You can of course find more information on that probably from some other channels if you want to dig into the whole barefoot conversation. But moving past that, so we are a lot taller, a lot more curved, and a lot less flexible than we were with that shoe. Now, I said with the barefoot shoe, it's designed to basically let your foot do the work. So if these are the opposite of that, then these shoes are designed to take away as much of the work as possible. To me, that's really what I've understood. When ASICS initially rolled out the Nova Blast model, that's this one here, the Nova Blast 3. But when they rolled out the first Nova Blast model, they were talking a lot about the research that they did into why the shoe was shaped the way that it was. And you can notice it's quite a smooth rocker on any of these shoes here. So if we put these here, and they were talking about how it was more efficient and that runners were experiencing less stress and less fatigue. I believe they used the word through the Achilles. That's kind of through the ankle area. So I want you guys to imagine a foot in this, and you bend forward through that step, and the thing is, normally you're loading through that step and then you finally toe off at the end, and that final kickback is when you get your propulsion in a forward direction. If you were to jump, which is of course an upward motion, you would come up onto your toes and then finally toe off and your foot would come up. But with running, you want to transfer as much of that energy that way as possible. You want to be moving forward when you do that. The way I understand it is as you lean forward, before you even toe off, but as you start to lean your weight forward, the shoe with very little effort, you can see I'm just starts to lean forward. And so you're coming forward through the knees, right? If you ever heard the whole keep your knees underneath you, or however that expression goes, or keep your feet beneath you. Well, if you're doing that, then your knee will come forward and you'll actually start to have your weight come through to the toes before you're actually doing the whole toe off motion, but your weight will come forward. And as your weight comes forward, you'll actually start to lean into the front of the shoe before you've begin to flex your calf and begin that toe off motion. So it's mainly what I believe I understand, and if I had to describe the feeling, because all these shoes are kind of similar in terms of like how they ride. Now, how early their rocker starts is different. This is you can see this is a late. It's late, meaning it starts like here and then it comes up very sharply. But if you look at this starts about here, quite a bit further back, and then it comes forward. This one's kind of in between the two. I think that where the rocker starts and how extreme it is all kind of building into the geometry of how you transfer your energy when you do this dig right before you toe off. When you do this toe off, it's leaning you forward as much as possible so that your weight is coming backwards, which I believe is just a more efficient way to have your pull, your dig be more horizontal. I do notice it feels like, sometimes when I'm running, my head does this. You guys are probably pretty familiar. You bounce a little bit when you run. It does feel to me that when I'm running in these shoes that have a little bit more of a rocker, it does feel like I have a little bit less head motion. It feels like I'm bopping up and down a little bit more. And to me, if I'm expending energy coming up and coming down, that's obviously energy that's not being expended going forward. And so I think, to me, that's the big part about efficiency. But then also they did talk about reducing ankle flexion. And I think what they're talking about is if the shoe is bending for you, so you got to imagine the Achilles here and the heel, that if the shoe is bending forward before you are, because if you just came through and this was flat, right, you would have to, your ankle, which is coming up, would have to start bending forward to get that flexion. But if the shoe is bending for you, then it's almost like you can keep this straighter for longer before you actually go through the toe off motion. I believe over the course of many, many miles, that is a little bit less energy expended per ankle flick. At least that's what I believe some of the literature has kind of suggested, is that you're expending less energy per flick of your foot. And over the length of several miles, that can save you a little bit of energy. Now, as far as is that good for you? Is that bad for you? I think, you have to buy shoes for what you want. If you're wanting a shoe that helps you out as much as possible, I do think that a lot of these shoes that have more of the rocker designs, I do believe that they do that. But if you're wanting to, build your muscles and you're wanting to, strengthen your feet and stuff like I was talking about earlier with the whole Vivo Barefoot, then, I do think that these shoes are pretty much designed to take away as much of the work for yourself as possible. I could be completely wrong. This is just my take on what's the deal between, having a rocker and not having a rocker. Obviously, you'll find that a lot of the more efficient racing shoes, the more performance-oriented shoes that are meant to get the best possible times, you will find that they all have sort of a curve to them like this. So I believe there's at least some amount of data that is suggesting that this is the correct, not the correct, but perhaps the most efficient shape that could be achieved in a shoe. So anyways, guys, thank you guys for stopping in. This has been me talking about kind of flatter shoes versus more rockered shoes. If you guys have any thoughts, please put them down below. But again, I thank you always for your viewership. We'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you.